Good morning, dear students. How are you doing? Let's start our another lesson of preparation to IELTS exams. My name is Jumataeva. I am an English teacher of Nazarbayev Intellectual School of Physics and Mathematics in Astana. Today we are going to talk about tables. Do you remember? We have learned about graphs, diagrams and tables before. The lesson we are having today is a description of tables. And also we will talk about description of maps and map language. So let's look at the pictures. These are the samples of tables. And these are images of maps. The aim of our lesson is to help to teach students with doing task 1 in the academic writing module in the IELTS exam. And also to help students and you describe tables and maps in IELTS writing task 1. What are the objectives of our lesson? First, understand the different features and purpose of tables and maps. Second, identify significant information to use in the answer. Third, learn how to organize the description of a table and a map. Fourth, learn language map. You know that describing an IELTS table is similar to describing charts or graphs. A table is just another way to present information. So, when we describe tables, there is the same structure of comparison and contrast, and we use language of change if the table is over time. For example, take a look at this table showing the quality of life in 4 countries presented in a table. What are the countries? Bangladesh, Bolivia, Egypt, Indonesia and USA. And what are the columns of the table? GNP per head, the date is 1982 and US dollars are used. The next column is daily calorie supply per head. The fourth column is life expectancy at birth. And the last column is infant mortality per 1,000 live births. If we wanted, we could present this same information as a bar chart. Look, here is the bar chart. But as you will notice, it is better to present as a table because of the huge difference between the USA and the others. This is not very clear on a bar chart. Do you agree with it? So a table looks better, but they would both be described in exactly the same way. When we describe tables, we don't describe all the data presented. We should present the main points of each feature. You should make sure you mention each feature though. We should look for significant data. What is the highest? What is the lowest? We should try and group the data. This way may require you to use some general knowledge about the world, such as recognizing developed and developing countries. You have learned that you should spend about 20 minutes on task 1. And the following table gives statistics showing the aspects of quality of life in 5 countries. Write a report for a university lecture describing the information in the table below. You should write at least 150 words. Can you recognize this information? So, yes, that is the task for writing task 1 for IELTS exam. Look at the IELTS table that you looked at above and answer the questions that follow. What is the table measuring? What type of language do you need to use? Change, comparing and contrasting. What tense would you use? Which country has the best quality of life and which has the worst? What information could you use for an overview, for a conclusion? How could you group the information? How many paragraphs would you have and what would you write about in each one? So, let's look at the table and let's answer this question. What is the table measuring? You can work in groups for answering these questions. And you can also make notes of answers in your notebook. What is the table measuring? Topic: standard of living, 5 countries. What type of language do you need to use change or comparing and contrasting? Sure, we use language of comparison. What tense would you use? So if we have this information 1982, we use past tense. Which country has the best quality of life and which has the worst? So we should overview the USA far higher. What information could you use for an overview and conclusion? Groups: USA the highest, Egypt, Indonesia, Bolivia similar, and Bangladesh very low. How could you group the information? So the same information you can use for grouping. USA the highest, Egypt, Indonesia, Bolivia similar, and Bangladesh is very low. How many paragraphs would you have and what would you write about in each one? You should always ask yourself these kind of questions before you write your task 1. You can then use the answer to these questions to make yourself a quick plan. So look, these are the stages of our plan. Topic: standard of living, 5 countries, language comparison, time tense 1982, it means past, overview USA far higher, groups USA the highest, Egypt, Indonesia, Bolivia similar, Bangladesh is very low. So we are going to talk about IELTS table model answer, and you can notice how the organization matches the plan. The groups chosen that are similar are grouped together into paragraphs. And the language of this task is focused on the language of comparison and contrast, as the table is not over time. The compare and contrast structures have been highlighted so you can see how they are used. As it's similar to the way you would have organized the information. So you can look at this sample answer. No, it looks like this. And let's watch the table and describe. The table uses 4 economic indicators to show the standard of living in 5 selected countries in 1982. Overall, it can be seen that the quality of life in the USA was far higher than the other 4 countries. To begin, the USA, which is a developed country, had the highest GNP at $13,160 per head. It also had a much higher daily calorie intake and life expectancy and the lowest rate of infant mortality. The other developing countries had quality of life ratings that were significantly lower. The range of indicators for Egypt, Indonesia, and Bolivia were similar, with Egypt having the highest quality of life amongst the 3. However, the infant mortality rate in Egypt was slightly higher than Indonesia's at 97 deaths per 1,000 compared to 78 in Indonesia. Bangladesh had by far the lowest quality of life in all the indicators. Its GNP was 100 times smaller than the USA's. its calorie intake and life expectancy were about half those of the USA, and its infant mortality rate was 10 times greater. Now, let's watch a video about describing a table. This video will give you optional information and you will be more confident how to describe the tables.
Hi everyone, welcome back. It's nice to see you all again. How are you? Now, in the last two lessons we looked at two different IELTS questions describing a line graph, a bar graph, pie charts. Today we're going to move forward and look at what's slightly more complicated, and we're going to describe a table. Now, it's only slightly more complicated, so most of this lesson will be in the same procedure as the other two lessons, but there are some slight differences. So, as usual, we're going to start by looking at the question. Then we're going to look at the table itself and interpret the information that's given. And then we will look at the language in the question and the table, paraphrasing it, using useful vocabulary. And then looking at the data in the table itself and trying to understand what's going on to be able to describe those trends and to compare the information that we're given. And within this, we will need some useful vocabulary for balancing information, so we're going to look at some linking words. And you will see that because a table is organized slightly differently to a graph, this table is going to help us to create the paragraphs as we understand, as we start writing the descriptions of the trends and the data. So we're going to write the introduction and the main paragraphs as we go through the lesson. So, looking at the question. Now, this question is about cultural attractions in the UK. These are museums and galleries, and these particular museums and galleries in the table are situated in London, and they're the most popular museums and galleries probably in the country. Okay, and we're going to look at how different numbers of visitors to each of these galleries and museums are presented over 3 different decades. Okay, so we've got 1981, 1991 and 2001, and we're going to look at the number of people who actually visited in those years. Okay, so let's look at the table. Now, the table has lots of different elements, so the first thing I'll do is to describe what these different elements are. Vertically, running up and down, you've got columns, and our columns are concerned with the years in which these figures were measured. Okay, 1981, 1991 and 2001. Inside these columns you have the data, okay, and the data is for the number of people who actually visited in those years. And 2.6 or 1.9 is in millions. Okay, so from the key we can see the actual multiples who visited. Okay, so it's not 2.9 visitors, which would be quite strange. I don't know if you can get 0.9 of a person, but it's 2.9, 2.6, 3.2 million. Okay. If you look closer in this table, you've got this expression NA. NA means not available. The Tate Modern is a gallery which only opened in May 2000, okay? So therefore, before the year 2000, and in our case 2001, there were no visitors there because the gallery didn't exist. So that's why we've only got figures for one of the years. Now, on the left-hand side, you've got the rows, and the rows will tell you which museum the data is referring to, in which year. So we've got 6 museums and galleries here. And if you look at the last 2 museums, the Natural History Museum and the Science Museum, there is a little asterisk beside it which directs your attention to the footnote. And the footnote explains a little bit more about those museums and galleries. And for these 2 museums and galleries, it's the fact that they were no longer free in the 1980s, so the museums felt the need to charge visitors, which was quite controversial at the time because traditionally in Britain, museums and galleries like to be free for everyone, okay, and people would go along and they would give a small donation, but they wouldn't pay to enter. However, these two museums felt the need to introduce admission charges, obviously because of lack in revenue, lack of funds to keep the museums going. Okay, so and that's explained in the footnote. Now, looking closely at the data in this table, we can see that the table presents it conveniently for us in terms of paragraphing into three different sections. Okay, this first section, which I have a red box over, the trend is upwards. Okay, just look at the first year and the last year, and you can see that the
As you have watched the video, I hope that you enjoyed it. And now the time for tips and advice. What kind of tips can we suggest you to write your proper IELTS writing task 1? Now the first. When starting to summarize a table, check the time frame. What tense will you be using? It's very important. Another tip is make a list of some of the vocabulary you would like to use. Look at the sample. Another tip is divide into groups and review the data. Try to divide the table into two significant parts. Look for a way to group the data. Also, look for any exceptions. Percentage aged over 75 falls for the first time in 2050. Below, the data is divided into groups of 20 years. Another option could have been total population, population aged more than 75. The table used is more simple than an official IELTS exam to clearly show the procedures. Paragraph 1 will be the introductory statement. In this example, 2 sentences may be necessary. Use 2 main paragraphs to describe each group derived from the table. If possible, make a comparison or contrast in the paragraphs. For the first paragraph, there is a comparison between 2 groups within the first group of 20 years. Paragraph 2 focuses on the next 20 years and acknowledges the exception in the graph. For the summary sentence, try to look for something significant and related to the paragraphs. For example, during the time period, the amount of people over 75 doubled. Usually, when we write, we can make some mistakes. It's normal. So let's see common mistakes made and how can we avoid them. For the summary, do not include an opinion or extra information. Do you remember this? Including too many figures and not being selective. Not making a plan to organize the essay. These are common mistakes that you should avoid when you write your task 1. For your best preparation, you should practice the tests. First, try the task with no time limit. Master the skills, then focus on completing it within 20 minutes. Become accustomed to not using the dictionary. Now, we are going to talk about map language, or how to describe maps. Do you know how can you describe a map? And when you write about a map, you need to focus on describing where things are in location to each other. Keywords are here, where and in location. We can use language such as to the left, next to, north of, behind, and they are very important. These words are very important for describing a map. Now it's time for a video, and you will learn more about maps vocabulary.
Hi. Press the pause button if you need longer to read the following screens, and the play button to continue. In IELTS Academic Task 1 Writing, you are asked to write about either graphs, tables or diagrams, maps, flowcharts, etc. This special series will focus on tables and diagrams. We will begin by briefly noting the important features of the table on the right and the task requirements. In the second part, a model task response will be provided. This is a task. It is important to do as the task requires when writing about the table. The table provides information about the populations of 5 large countries. You must summarise the information by selecting the main features of the table and make comparisons where relevant. The response must be not less than 150 words. 2 countries have a far greater number of people than the other countries. Note the information below indicating that totals are sometimes given in millions and sometimes in billions. With regard to population density, India is very densely populated and Russia is very sparsely populated. Russia was the only country to have negative population growth. Russia was also the country with the lowest life expectancy. Russia has the lowest figures for all 4 areas of population: smallest population, lowest density, in negative growth, and lowest life expectancy. The data shows the 2011 figures for 5 large countries according to 4 population measures: size, density, growth, and life expectancy. It is clear that India and China are by far the largest countries in terms of population size, whose figures are given in billions at 1.21 billion and 1.35 billion respectively. In terms of population density, there are far more people per square kilometre in India than any other country. China, in contrast, has a larger population, but its density is just over 1/3 of India's. Russia's population density is a mere 8 people per square kilometre, making it the most sparsely populated. Although China has the largest population, its annual growth rate of 0.63% is the lowest with the exception of Russia's. India's growth rate is more than double China's, even though in 2011 its population was smaller. Brazil's and Indonesia's growth rate is about 1% per annum. For 4 of the countries, life expectancy is broadly similar, ranging between 70 years in India and 74 in China. Once again, Russia is the exception, with the length of years people live for being about 66. Overall, there are considerable differences in the data given, but Russia seems quite different in terms of its low population density, negative population growth rate, and lowest life expectancy. That concludes the tutorial. If you want more help with your IELTS, go to www.myenglishexam.com.
Have you enjoyed the video? Was everything clear for you? Good. Below, the map, which is a model answer that has been written by an IELTS instructor. Map of Brentfield with 2 proposed sites for a shopping mall. Look carefully, please. This is the model answer. The map illustrates plans for 2 possible sites for a shopping mall in the city of Brentfield. It can be seen that the 2 sites under consideration are in the north and the southeast of the town. The first possible site for the shopping mall, S1, look at the map, is just north of the city center, above the railway line, which runs from the southeast of the city to the northwest. If it is built here, it will be next to a large housing estate, thus providing easy access for those living on the estate and in the city center. It will also be next to the river, which runs through the town. The site in the southeast, S2, is again just by the railway line and fairly close to the city center, but it is near to an industrial estate rather than housing. There is a main road that runs through the city and is close to both sides, thus providing good road access to either location. A large golf course and park in the west of the town prevents this area from being available as a site. So, we have done a lot of job today. Good you are. The next step of our lesson is feedback. Please tick next to the number, next to the expression that you agree with. Number 1, I have learned a lot of new information for me. Number 2, I know all this material. There is nothing new. Number 3, it was so boring. I could hardly wait for the end of the lesson. Don't forget to take your opinion. This is a list of references which were used to prepare this lesson. And you can find this lesson on the website moodle.nis.edu.kz. Thank you very much for your attention. Take care of yourself. Goodbye.